learning is no longer a nice thing to do as a hobby on the side. It's a necessity today. The world is moving fast. So you need to make lifelong learning a critical part of your day job. If you want to be able to compete, if you want to be able to generate value. Hello everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of Data and AI Mastery. Now, if you're a long-time listener, you'll know that each episode typically features a conversation with one of the world's leading voices in data and AI. But today, to mark a 6-month anniversary, we are flipping the script. That's right, this time, I'm the one in the hot seat. In this episode, I sit down with Cambridge Spark's CTO, Kevin Lemagnen, to share more about my own journey, how I got started, what inspired me to launch Cambridge Spark, and what I've learned working with organizations across industries. Together, we'll explore some of the biggest shifts happening in the data and AI landscape right now, as well as revisit some of the most powerful insights shared by our incredible guests so far. And of course, I couldn't escape the pressure of a now infamous Quickfire round. Ready? Let's dive in.
Welcome Raoul to your own podcast. How does it feel to be the guest today?
Thank you, Kevin. Feels great. Feels weird too. You're interviewing me.
Yeah, it's my turn today.
I interviewed you more than 6-7 years ago for the job of CTO, so
time flies.
Time really flies.
All right, so I've got a few questions for you, Raoul. Quite interested to know a little bit about your journey and how you got into the AI space yourself.
Great question, Kevin. So it really started with playing games. Do you remember Civilization, Age of Empires?
I do remember
Warcraft?
Civilization, yeah.
Those were really fun games. And, you already had AI, right? Like you were playing against the computer. So that's probably where it all started, maybe 6 years old, first computer, play games. And then I got really interested in computer science, how do you build games, right? So got interested in programming languages. And you fast forward, maybe 15 years later, I did my PhD in computer science and I did research on code analysis. And that was probably when I got even more interested in the space of data and AI, because when you look at programming languages and how code gets compiled and executed, there's a bunch of interesting data that gets generated, right? You've got obviously data structures that come out of the compiler, the abstract syntax tree, then you've got logs, then you've got errors, you've got a combination of unstructured data and structured data. So doing my research, I was kind of like trying to figure out how can I run source code queries on code. So I had to come up with a new data model, so like using graph databases. So that's probably the space of data. I could geek it out big time, but also at the largest scale. So I was looking at how can we query code with millions and million lines of code. That got me to work at Oracle and the Java team, at Google and the Python team. And after all that, I thought, hey, well, there's no AI yet. So far, it's basically querying data, right? So how do you make it more intelligent? And I always had this idea of what if the compiler could remember errors from the programmer, right? Because like you compile your code, you run it, there's a bunch of errors. But every time you recompile your code, the compiler is not really intelligent. It's almost like a function call, right? Input, output. But what if there was some state, right? What if you could be intelligent and remember the history, kind of like tell the developer, hey, like you've made this mistake before. Like, how can I help you not make it again in the future, right? But sadly, I had to finish my PhD, so I could not really explore this idea. But it made me want to create a company, so Cambridge Spark, all about personalizing education for technology. So this idea of remembering mistakes, supporting developers, data scientists, bring AI into our teaching delivery. That's probably when it really sparked.
Interesting. So so that's for data and AI. I'm interested as well about your interest in education, because that's also something, and I remember speaking to you about that before, but could you walk us through a bit about your early interest in education?
Yeah, great. So, I started teaching kids how to code when I was a teenager, right? So in high school, I was just fascinated by how things work, right? So especially I remember in maths classes, physics classes, we had this calculator, right? Old school, not even your phone now, but like really it was like bricks that you kind of write maths formula on. And I was kind of like, I started to like, hey, like maybe I can create programs to like embed the formulas in so I don't have to remember them. It's a little easier. And then my friends at school, like, can you teach me like how to do that? Because, for tests, it was super helpful to have all the formulas in your calculator. So there I started like teaching my friends at school, like how you can code on your calculator. Then obviously took it further, starting to teach people about, at the time was Perl, the programming language, good old days, right? Really good with text and regexes and so on. So I was kind of like really enjoying building and teaching other people how to build things. Um, and I created websites and communities when I was a teenager, and then, came to study here in England at Imperial College. I was always participating in tutoring sessions. I was kind of just passionate about it. There's something super cool about education, especially in the world of technology, because you can see the output of what you learn super quickly, right? If you learn like a new programming language or a new library or a new trick, you can apply it immediately. You can see it, you can play with it, right? Exactly. The feedback loop is super fast. So it's both impactful. You're doing something good, right, with education, empowering people with skills so they can do whatever they want to do. So it's impactful and also rewarding. And then I took that further in my PhD, of course. In a PhD, you have to do on one side, the definition of a PhD is literally make a contribution to human knowledge. So you have to research, but also there's expectation that you are involved in the teaching and education system and support, maybe more junior students in their own journey. So I really enjoyed that. I was lecturing, then wrote a book. I was like, hey, like, why not? This is cool. Wrote a book on functional programming with Java. Would you believe it? Yeah, those were the days. And then it was only natural to take that interest further and expand it into Cambridge Spark and create something much bigger and more impactful.
Yeah, combining data and AI together with education. Amazing. And can you tell us a bit more about your motivation behind the podcast?
Well, so it was a realization of a few things, right? So one, Kevin, as you know, the space of data and AI is moving so fast. Oh my God. Like the sort of advancements in technology is phenomenal. So that's the first thing, right? Speed of innovation is super fast. And as a result of that, there's some level of anxiety and unknown that gets created, right? It's like, what should we do with it? What are people doing with it? What impact does it deliver for businesses? So this realization that, we're in a fast moving world, and people and organization want to know what they can do, right? That's one. Secondly, we live in an industry where I think it's really important to learn from people and be inspired by others, including, more senior people, right? There's a lot of, individuals in the new generation enters the employment market and wants to know, like, how can I progress in my career? What does it take to be the next CIO, the next CDO? What's the journey, right? And thirdly, you also have a lot of business people that are curious about how can they incorporate technology, data and AI to deliver tangible ROI. So if you take those three ingredients, right, like fast moving worlds where you kind of like, you want to keep up with it, then you also want to have inspiring, impactful careers. And also, how do we deliver ROI? Well, if you combine all of that, that's really the thesis for the podcast, right? How can we give a platform for senior leaders to share their thought leadership so that they can inspire the next generation? They can educate the business world around impact and ROI. And for everybody, have a source of knowledge and information to keep up with the latest advancement.
And so over the past 6 months, I would say, when speaking to all those guests and with your work at Cambridge Park, are there any themes or concerns that you've heard quite a few times and you want to walk us through maybe?
It's a great question. There are definitely common themes that come out of conversations. I'd say the first is we can all get really excited about technology investment, but you're never going to deliver impact unless you bring people along the journey, right? Like, there's no point spending millions of pounds in like your latest sort of licenses or your latest vendor if people don't understand why should they care, what it can do for them, what's the impact for the business, and they're also supported with new skills, behavior, mindset to make it all happen. So a big theme is actually to deliver a transformation, specifically to deliver on your AI transformation with the promise of productivity, ROI, speed. You've got to bring people along the journey, right? So you got to think about your culture, you got to think about change management, you got to think about upskilling or reskilling. So that's one big theme. The second theme is it's moving fast. You can really hear it. Like the speed of innovation, generative AI is incredible, right? Like maybe a year ago, we'd be playing with prompt engineering. Like we were even talking about prompt engineering, right? Like you had to like write things into a special way because the tool was not good enough and so on. There's lots of hallucinations. It's already moved quite fast, right? So you don't need to be like super strict about the structure of your messages now. Actually the level of understanding of language has already made a leap forward. Hallucinations and errors like that, you still have that, but it's definitely reducing. So another theme is the technology has become really, really good. So it raises the question of how do you reimagine your workflows in your business now that technology is really, really good? So that's also a common theme, right? This idea of, we're having to reimagine the art of the possible.
And so I know you're someone who is not interested in technology for the sake of it, but really care about the value, the ROI of using those technologies. So with all the hype around Gen AI today, where would you say it's actually delivering value to organization, and where would you say it's falling short a little bit?
Great question. So I think it's helpful to, address a question like that of ROI and value to maybe a bit of an academic framework, right? So I love the value stack as a way to think about value, right? So you've got on one side, how do you increase delight for your customers? So you create new value for them, or you make your cost of service cheaper, right? Those are kind of like fundamentally the only two things you can do, right? That's why it's called a value stack, because either you make your service cheaper and potentially you reduce your price, or you keep the same price and you've created more value, right? Or the upper side is you delight your customer in new ways and they're willing to pay more for your service. So if we think about ROI, let's look at it in this framework, right? So there's only two options. You make things cheaper, or you delight your customers more and they'd be willing to pay more for your service. Now, what we're seeing today, I would say, is a lot more focus on productivity, efficiency, so making the cost of service cheaper, right? And that might be because there's more automation, there's more efficiency, or you can do a lot more with the same amount of effort, right? So like, for example, augmenting your team to increase the throughput. This is all about reduction of cost of service. So we're seeing definitely ROI there, which typically translate in removing waste in organization, workforce productivity improvements, and so on. Now, on increasing customer delight, I think we're still figuring this out, right? What I'm hearing it through the conversations is that Actually, as soon as you think about AI for your customers, things are a little more risky, right? If you think about the context of a regulated environment, you want to make sure that the message you put in front of your customer is robust, right? It's not made up. You'll make sure it's the right tone. So I remember, I interviewed Richard, VP of AI at Virgin Atlantic. They were really looking at LLMs to support customer conversations because the tone and feel at Virgin Atlantic decided it's a premium service, so important. So a lot of resources is spent there, right, with the purpose of delighting the customer. But you can't just, have an off-the-shelf LLM and be happy with it. You got to be super careful, right? So it's really aligned to your value proposition. So I guess long story short, the sort of ROI that we're seeing today is definitely more at the productivity level, and the typical business functions that I'm hearing is, R&D. You would know, right, as the CTO of Cambridge Spark, empowering our software engineers with code generation, test generation, even now like SQL queries and so on. You can just do more faster, right? So R&D is definitely proven now, right? You can do more with those tools. Then you've got the whole space of customer service operations, things like call center, chat, AI agents. That sort of stuff is pretty good now. It's not perfect. Klarna was in the news recently. They invested a lot in, AI for customer service operation, but the technology was not perfect. So they had to kind of like roll back a little bit, have a human in the loop. But ultimately, it's still about productivity improvement and cost efficiency, right? So we're there. That's the current phase. And it kind of makes sense. Every organization out there, you want to be able to operate in a more agile manner and more efficiently, so you can spend more time innovating for your customer, right? The next phase, ROI for customer delight, still new, still to be seen. And I suspect that there's a lot more investment that will be required to go deeper into your domain, right? For example, at Cambridge Spark Education, we're investing a lot in how can AI support personalized learning, right? So you're going to have to go really deep and really understand your customer.
A lot more experimentation as well, trial and error to figure out what works, what doesn't work, and that makes it quite exciting.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So obviously, you've been speaking to a lot of business leaders. What role do you think they play in unlocking that the ROI, and what skills would you recommend they develop?
Great question. I mean, AI touch every role, every organization. I mean, it's one of those transformative technology. You have to be on board, right? If you're not, then, you're basically saying, I don't want to be able to compete. I don't want to be able to keep up. You're not going to have a business. So every leaders out there needs to be educated around what the technology can do for the organizations. Understand the risk associated to it. Understand what does it mean for the business strategy. Can AI be aligned to specific goals and outcomes for the business? So I would start with that for leaders. Encourage experimentation, right? Like, I'm sure you'd agree, like the best way to learn about a new technology is to like try it out yourself. Today there's so many consumer-based tools. You can like have a play tomorrow to have a feel for its capability. Now, also encourage leaders to think about how to empower the workforce. There's no point having this like amazing strategy if you can't execute on it, right? So that's the next steps. And to execute on it, you need people on the journey with the right skills, the right mindset. Now, the next part is to be able to execute, you need the culture to be aligned, right? You're not going to be able to execute if people don't care and are like, I don't want to change. I don't want to do this. So I would encourage leaders to think broadly about those three buckets, right? Like it's almost like you want to start with culture. You'll make sure there's passion around what AI can do for the organization, for the people. Then you want to make sure that, you've got all the right ingredients to execute well, your operational rhythm, your cadence, your metrics, and all that. And then all of it needs to be aligned with ultimately your corporate strategy and the vision of the organization, right? So it's not easy, but the job of a leader is not supposed to be easy, right?
Time to place some bets, Raoul. So I'd like you to make a bold prediction about where data and AI will be in, let's say, 6 months time. That's
6
not
months
so
time.
long, but a lot happens in 6 months.
All right, let me take my crystal ball out of my pocket here and like predict the future. I tell you what I'm excited about is the topic of AI agents and then extending that further into agentic AI. The reason I'm excited for it is I can see a lot of value for education and at Cambridge Spark specifically, right? So the topic of an AI agent, if we spend a bit of time defining it, right, it's essentially you need conversational AI, so the ability to kind of like talk to it, whether it's written form or audio form, right, like you would do with ChatGPT and whatnot. Then you need the idea of storage, remembering. Earlier I was saying like, what if a compiler could like remember errors? Right? So this idea that we remember conversation, we remember what you care about as the user. Then the ability to be able to take some action, interact with tools, right? In our context, it might be interact with a Jupyter notebook, right? Or it might be to interact with Microsoft Copilot that is actually on a user's computer, right? So be able to interact and take action with the environment. So that's really what an AI agent on top of be able to plan a serious task, right? So within the next 6 months, I expect a lot more progress in this space. And I'm excited by it because for us at Cambridge Spark, we had the opportunity to give each of our students really personalized learning and go in fine great detail, right? You can imagine that, Kevin, you might have a personalized AI agent as your 24/7 tutor that's responsible to guide you through a Q&A, questions you might have about content, how to relate it to your work. You might have another agent that's more specialized and help you reflect and brainstorm around ROI. How do you embed those skills at work, right? So I'm excited by that technology. It feels kind of ready, right? Like we already have conversational AI. Ultimately, that's like the big thing. Then wrapping it around with state and action, that's just like straightforward software development at this point. So I think there'll be more progress in the next 6 months. You can see there's already a bunch of framework and libraries and like way of testing the systems are coming out.
All right, Raoul. So I'd like to spend some time reflecting a little bit about the last 6 months on the podcast. So you've had remarkable guests here. Are there any moments that stand out that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, I've enjoyed every single conversation I had with my guests, and they all like stand out. But there's a few that come to mind immediately. I've really enjoyed my conversation with Renil, the Chief Data Analytics Officer at Lloyds Banking Group. And this idea of you've got to combine augmentation with reimagination. So, if you're looking at innovating, you kind of need two streams, right? You need a stream of how do I make the day-to-day better? So that's the augmentation. And we talked about, incremental improvements, productivity, and so on. But that's almost like business as usual, right? Every organization out there, you have to think about reducing waste, be more nimble and agile. Now, in moments like we have today, you also need to think about reimagining your whole business fundamentally, right? You don't want to miss out, for example, back in days, you don't want to miss out on the internet wave. You don't want to miss out on mobile wave. And we've seen in the banking industry, here comes the neobanks, mobile native, and they grabbed a whole bunch of users. They've created the niche and expanded from it. If you're a big legacy organization, you have this dilemma between investing in incremental improvement, but also reimagination when there's a whole new market that can get created. So it's a balancing act. So I really love, that discussion with Renil. It's broadly the innovator dilemma, right? Like, do you disrupt yourself? Do you wait to be disrupted? That's kind of like the tension. That was great conversation. I love the discussion with Manfred, the CIO of NATO. Asking the question like, hey, with AI, like, how do you innovate? How do you empower your people? I was like, hey, I love running hackathons in the organization because it facilitates experimentation, it brings people together, it creates a good buzz, and out of it, you create change agents. And to deliver change in a lot of organization, you're going to need champions. So hackathons are a great way to create those change agents. That was a great discussion. Loved the conversation with David Treat, the CTO of Pearson. Obviously big education company like us, so it was really relatable. And we're talking about the skills that are needed in a fast-moving world, right? And the standout answer to that was critical thinking. We're clearly becoming more reliant on those tools that drain output. We still need to be able to challenge it, verify it, trust it. So invest in kind of critical thinking, all the frameworks around it is so important, right? And the analogy is, once you have a calculator that gives you an answer, you still want to spot that this feels off, right? There's an extra zero here that doesn't make sense. The order of magnitude doesn't make sense in the answer. So maybe there's a typo, right? Even though the calculator can do it better, faster than both of us, right? You still need the ability to verify and challenge it. So yeah, those are kind of like a few nuggets that come to mind, Kevin.
As we've discussed, you've had a very sort of early interest in education, in data and AI. Over the past 6 months, speaking to all those business leaders and at prestigious organizations, have you changed the way you think about education and lifelong learning in a way?
It's obvious to me, and it's always been obvious, but it's been reinforced today, that learning is no longer a nice thing to do as a hobby on the side. It's a necessity today. The world is moving fast. So you need to make lifelong learning a critical part of your day job. If you want to be able to compete, if you want to be able to generate value, we are having to reinvent ourselves very regularly through learning new skills and new knowledge. And there's no better way to do that than do it at work. And this is why I love what we do at Cambridge Spark. In particular, I love what we do with apprenticeships. Apprenticeships are an amazing opportunity for individuals to learn while being employed, while on the job, and apply the skills directly at work and demonstrate ROI to the employers. So I guess back to your question, it just reinforced this idea that learning is now a necessity and learning on the job is vital. And more employers should think about supporting their staff.
Okay, Raoul, so my favorite part of the show now, I've got a few quickfire questions for you. So what is a contrarian view that you have in the industry?
I think people talk a lot about AI's freeing up time because, it's removing the stuff that is not fun, right? Like, I am no longer taking meeting notes. That's a basic example. But that's not really freed up my time. I'm actually spending more time doing other work, right? So I think my contrarian view is, while, there's a pitch around AI freeing up time, the reality it's increasing throughput, but you're still having to, use the same number of hours and you choose the more work. And it might be more interesting work, by the way, right? Which I think that's fair.
And how do you stay up to date as a leader?
I stay up to date as a leader by talking to people a lot, right? So I love
Starting a podcast.
starting a podcast. That's like the meta way of doing it, right? It's like you learn through your own podcast, through inviting, excellent guests and have great conversations. So I love doing that. Every day, I'm reading. Like I've made reading a core part of my day-to-day agenda, right? Like in the morning, in the evening, through newsletters, through content on socials and so on, and attending conferences and networking events. So it's really a core part of my life now.
Question I really like. If you had a magic wand, what is the number one issue you would solve in the industry?
I wish I could solve personalized learning for every student on the planet through AI and give them the most fulfilling careers and outcomes that each person desire.
What was your favorite subject at school?
Oh God, favorite subject. That's cool. It's a weird one because obviously I loved coding and programming, but it wasn't a subject at school. Back then, it's only, many years later, people realize, hey, you know what, it'd be a great idea to teach computing earlier on than at university, right? But back in my times, it wasn't a thing. Um, I mean, I enjoyed maths, biology, and geography, range of topics, but maths was probably the number one subject that, I just loved geeking out about.
And my favorite question, what is your favorite programming language? And don't say Java, please.
Man, like, Java is a great programming language. It's improved over time.
Is that your answer?
Probably not. I mean, at different ages, I had different, favorites, right? Like when I was a teenager, it was Perl. When I came to uni, Java was my favorite programming language. And during my PhD, Python was my favorite programming language. And to this day, I code mostly in Python, right? I mean, the language becomes so versatile, such a rich ecosystem of open source libraries, such an amazing community around it. So it's not just the programming language, it's like everything around it. So Python is my favorite, and I think it will continue to be for the near future.
That's a great choice. And finally, what is your favorite music genre?
Oof. That's a tough one. Again, it's context dependent. If I hit the gym, I love some hardcore, like rock, metal, R&B, rap, that whole angry category to push. But on the day-to-day, I'd probably say I'm more into electro, trance, Afrobeats. It's kind of more like house, chill music. That would be my commute kind of music.
Solid choices. All right, thanks, Raoul. That was all I had for today.
Thank you, Kevin. It's been a pleasure. Well, there we go. That's it for this special episode of Data and AI Mastery. Thank you again for joining me. I have to say, I've really enjoyed opening up on my career journey. I hope you can take something away from the lessons I've learned throughout my time in the data and AI space. More broadly, however, reflecting on the first 15 episodes has been really inspiring, and I'm so excited for what the future holds for the podcast. Needless to say, my team and I are working tirelessly to bring you even more amazing content in the weeks and months to come. Also, if you haven't yet done so, can I ask that you subscribe, leave a review, and share the show with your network, as it all does make a massive difference. Together, we'll continue exploring how data and AI are shaping the future. Until next time, I'm Raoul, and this is the Data and AI Mastery Podcast.